for folks that they might not have liked the union, but they like the roads workers. And the roads workers are absolutely essential in building the bridges and clearing the snow in the winter.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We are going to be talking to Len Shindel, who is a union brother over in Maryland. And just to tell you a little bit about the book he's written, so it is about a public sector strike in rural Maryland in 1970. So not exactly an easy situation to be in. He wrote a little bit about AFSCME, right? So the county's road workers voted to join AFSCME, which is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Their request was bitterly opposed by an anti-union county commission majority and the local business leaders, but the workers and their wives would not be deterred. Reaching deep into their community and union for support, they waged an 8-month strike, which is the longest public workers' strike in U.S. history. The strike ushered in a political revolution in the thinly settled county, leading to indelible changes in its economics, politics, and culture. So some of the things he looks at is like, how did they survive financially and hold out so long in this really long and deep struggle of a strike? So Len, thank you so much for joining the Valley Labor Report. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
So I figure first, if you could just tell us, what is the book? Give us the title and just the high level, what is the book about?
Well, it's a 1970 Garrett County roads workers strike. It changed Wilderness, Maryland. The strike was, as you say, the longest public workers strike in U.S. history at the time. And it happened in a county that has never voted for, the majority's never voted for a Democrat for president. Largely a Republican county, and a county not known for a lot of labor struggle or labor organizing. Very much different than the neighboring county, Allegheny County and Cumberland, which was a major industrial center, at one time the second largest city in Maryland.
Yeah, something that stood out to me when I first found out about this book, and I'll say that I found out through an article in Portside and just happened to come across it. And I thought, wow, Maryland is not typically where we go in a lot of our coverage of Southern worker issues, but you're talking about a rural county, a very conservative county, sounds like a very white county. And so, very much resonates with some of the communities we have down here in Alabama, particularly in North Alabama, where we have some white, rural, conservative counties. And so the idea of not only these workers organizing, but taking on the county in this, huge and long strike is really fascinating to me. So I'll start here with the process you kind of went into with this book. My understanding is rooted in oral history. And so you did a lot of interviews with people who were directly involved or their descendants. So, what motivated you to take that approach to the book?
Well, before there was a book, my friend Saul Schneiderman, he was a AFSCME union president at the Library of Congress in Washington. And he told me about the strike, and he had just gotten a historic road marker erected for the great mine worker organizer, Mother Jones, in Adelphi, Maryland. And he said, why don't you guys go ahead and get a road marker about this strike? So it really started, I see the book as part of a project, and we had a lot of people from many sectors of Western Maryland, write letters, and we got a historic road marker. And then as I spoke with folks, I realized that there was really a dwindling number of strikers still with us. Many had passed on. Nobody had ever written about this strike, and I thought it was really important to get their voices before they passed on. So I talked to them, and I talked to the families of folks who had been on strike, and I talked to people on both sides of the conflict. My goal being to put real people into a book in a place where a lot of the books are about folks with wealth and power, and people who work for a living and certainly organize a union aren't necessarily portrayed.
Right, right. What you said really sticks with me because it resonates with conversations I've been having with union siblings here lately about trying to document these stories and talk to our older brothers and sisters and get their stories documented before they leave us. And
Exactly.
that is really, really huge. And also something that we have really noticed here in Alabama is that we have a deficit in terms of labor history. We have such a rich heritage of labor struggle in this state, but you wouldn't really know it from the history infrastructure. There's not an organized labor history society down here, really. We don't have, we don't have the road markers like you would imagine. Just you could go on and on. There's just a lack of these stories being told. So I want to just commend you for seeing an issue, seeing a struggle that was important to the community and that just really had not been well documented, had not been told. So thank you for doing that. And
Oh, that couldn't have happened without a good union pension and good union health care. I was a steelworker for 30 years. I worked for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers for 11 years, and that allowed me the opportunity to do this and not have to go back to work. So.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like a lot of the best union brothers out there, you're staying busy in retirement to help the movement, which we really appreciate. And
Exactly.
so, let's talk about kind of what got this started. This is a conservative county, anti-union leaders in the county. It was 1970. What motivated these road workers to organize, and what was, how did that pan out into an 8-month long strike?
It was low pay. It was poor working conditions. We get hammered by snow in Western Maryland. We have 3 climate effects that can come in, and certainly back then, 260, 300 inches of snow in a winter weren't an aberration. Folks had to stand on the back of trucks and spread cinders. Instead of getting overtime, they got compensatory time. So
Uh,
it was all those things. And this was 2 years after the 1968 Memphis sanitation strike. AFSCME, by that time, it had started out as a white collar union. And by that time, AFSCME was majority blue collar and had been affiliating with organizations like the Garrett County Roads Workers Association, which had formed in the 50s. And it included workers and managers, and had not much teeth in terms of improving the workers' conditions. So all those things led to an attempt by AFSCME to organize, and it was well received. And AFSCME did a great job reaching out and really listening to the workers in the county. For instance, folks from Baltimore from AFSCME came up and said, you need to strike in the wintertime where you have maximum leverage. At that
uh,
time, the roads were 2/3 unpaved. The ambulance service was provided by hearses from funeral homes, and the strikers said, we can't put our fellow citizens in this kind of danger, and AFSCME listened. And AFSCME continued listening and making those kinds of connections that need to be made to prevail.
yeah, and so the strike lasted longer than any other public worker strike we'd had up to this point. Is it still the longest public worker strike in U.S. history? to your knowledge?
I'm really not sure. I haven't.
It's hard.
I,
I will say it's
nobody.
hard to find a lot of
Yeah,
documentation on a lot of these
yeah,
public worker strikes. Here in
yeah,
Alabama, we've had a couple teacher strikes.
yeah.
One in '79, one in '80, and there's like almost nothing about it, right? So, which speaks to again, the importance of what you're doing with this book and with your work on this story. So the strike, whether it was the longest or not, it was pretty damn long, right? And so what
It
were
was
some of the
pretty damn long.
strategies? Yeah, what were some of the strategies, whether it's financial, social, psychological? I mean, how did the workers in their community endure this lengthy struggle?
Well, you're talking about a county of 30,000 people, and many of the original white settler families were here then and are here now. Interrelationships. Um, what I think helped them prevail is that they convinced the general population, which included their relatives and families and people that they knew from church and civic organizations, that it was the commissioners who were being unreasonable, that people have this right to a union. And certainly folks saw that in the neighboring county, in Allegheny County, that people had made great progress through organizing. So I think they convinced their fellow citizens that it was the two commissioners who were opposing the union that were being unreasonable. And as the potholes developed and the politicians weren't doing their jobs, which is to keep the county safe, that support grew. And I think, like in other struggles, you never know who your allies are until you fight. They might have assumed, the commissioners might have assumed that the people in the pastors in the religious community might not support the strikers. And lo and behold, one of the leading pastors was a retired member of the Mine Workers Union. And
Mm,
he wouldn't let any friction develop between the pastors and the parishioners that were on strike. They might have thought that a few business leaders that dominated the county politics would persuade people to go against the strikers. And I think there was a mixed kind of consciousness about the business leaders, a mix of respect and resentment. But people, the strikers and the families, by and large, believed that they didn't have a right to tell people whether they could have a union or not. And finally, the commissioners tried to say that this was Black people from Baltimore City that were causing this strike. Black people from AFSCME coming in from the outside to an all-white county,
mm.
stirring up trouble. And that backfired. People don't turn back help when it comes. There were touching stories, like one of the strike leaders' wives was pregnant, and the workers from Baltimore who came up in caravans with food and clothing brought her a baby outfit from a shop in Baltimore. So, any attempt to divide the workers from their supporters, white or Black, kind of backfired. And then finally, they thought they could depend on their political allies to crush the strike. And that backfired also. AFSCME, the AFSCME local endorsed candidates from both the Republican and Democratic parties in the primary, who they thought would settle the strike. And by the election, 3 Democrats were elected to the county commission in a county that has never, as I said before, voted for a Democrat for president of the United States, including FDR and JFK.
Wow. Wow. And this brings me to something else I wanted to touch on, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit with the community connection there, but I know something that you wanted to highlight was the role of the workers' wives, right, as well as the broader community. Did you have any examples or stories that really illustrate that kind of solidarity connection and how that was important to sustaining this strike.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've had personal experience, secondhand actually, watching companies try to divide husbands from their wives during a strike, actually sending out letters to the wives in the midst of a conflict, suggesting it's time for their husbands to go back to work. I think there might have been an assumption that that would happen here, and that backfired. In 2 months, the strikers' wives mobilized and actually took over the rotunda at the courthouse. Nothing like that had ever been conceived or happened in the county before. The county commissioners actually had to call the deputy sheriffs to escort them home at the end of the day. The strikers' wives played a pivotal role. And from then on, women in the county weren't to be taken lightly. Very important role, and it was exciting to talk to some of the strikers' wives and hear the pride expressed in the fact that they were taken for granted and stood up to protest their husbands' firings.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you also mentioned earlier that you did interview folks on the other side, right? Some of the strike's staunchest
I did.
opponents. So I'm curious, how did that go?
Well, I by chance I got to interview the one commissioner who was most steadfast in not wanting to recognize the union, and he gave me a lot of time. He was his family, who I knew from the steel mill in Baltimore. A lot of folks, I would say over half of the strikers, had family that came to the steel mills and shipyards and other companies in Baltimore when work got slack in the county. The coal mine shut down here in 1950. So, he gave me time, and he didn't hold back. And I was, I credit him with being gracious with his time, and I tried to be accurate in what he was saying. He's a man who hasn't changed many opinions in 50 years. So I tried to, like I said, I tried to be accurate. But in other cases, I interviewed a local businessman who said he didn't like unions, but he actually gave the strikers the locale for their store to distribute clothing and food, because he said he was a Christian and he thought that there were people that were on strike who might not have wanted to be on strike, and he wanted to help his community. He was not a union supporter, but I think that showed the breadth of support that was there for folks that they might not have liked the union, but they liked the roads workers, and the roads workers are absolutely essential in building the bridges and clearing the snow in the wintertime.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
When the strike came to an end, could you tell us a little bit of, what was the result? And then you also wrote that there were some really lasting changes in the county afterwards as part of the legacy of this strike. So, yeah, could you talk a little bit about how the strike came to an end and what was its impact since then?
Sure. The strike was settled within minutes after the 3 Democratic commissioners were installed. Unlike other struggles, say in Kentucky, West Virginia, the coal mine battles, this was a struggle between folks who might have been family, who might be the farmer up the road. Folks immediately went back to work and needed to get the roads ready for the upcoming winter. As far as lasting changes, folks tell me that local employers started raising wages slowly. There weren't tremendous financial gains from the strike, but the strikers told me that the main thing they gained was respect, that they now had a basis of negotiating in the future and not being part of an association that was, ineffective, but being part of an international union with a staff, and AFSCME had brought in a lot of financial support and other support during the strike. And, you know, in addition to that, folks having, many of them having farm families, shared food. I think that was essential. The long-term, you know, changes that took place within 10 or 15 years after this strike, the county hired its only woman on the roads crew, and she had previously been denied the job and had filed a discrimination charge. The strikers elected her president of the local union, and the staff representative assigned by AFSCME came from Cumberland, Maryland, as president of the roads workers in that city. He was a Black leader, well respected, and happens to be, his name is John Gates, and happens to be the first cousin of Professor Henry Louis Gates. So, you know, just in terms of how people perceive unions, how people perceive the multinational character of unions, and then from there, a modern bureaucracy was set up. Everything before the strike was handled by 3 part-time commissioners. Issues like transportation, emergency health care, the women in the community engaged through the League of Women Voters and fought domestic violence. Before they engaged, the deputy sheriffs would show up at a house where a husband was beating his wife, and they would leave, considering it a family matter. Women started engaging in, you know, more in the political process. Like I say, emergency health care, sex education in the schools. All of these changes came about, might have been retarded had the strike not replaced the old leadership with new leaders.
Yeah, and I think something that's really powerful about struggles like this is the way they empower folks. They empower regular, everyday people,
Exactly.
and it empowers them to then carry on new struggles and more struggles and continue that fight for justice wherever, whether that's in the workplace or in the community, at the ballot box, wherever it may be. You know, and also really appreciate you mentioning the faith connections earlier as well, since we had Michael Spock from the AFL-CIO on this morning to talk about labor in the pulpit and, you know, why that's an important initiative. And I think, you know, here's a real life example of where faith community played a role in this strike.
Sure.
And it was important to have those connections and relationships.
Sure.
And sometimes, yeah, it's not always that you're going to have supporters, but maybe you nullify some opposition, right? You know, and sometimes
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, the commissioner that was most opposed to the strike was quoted in the paper saying to the ministers, you save souls and we'll save the county. And, you know, I think he underestimated the sympathy that some of the pastors would have for their own parishioners. And, you know, we're not talking about wealthy mega churches with people with planes. We're talking about small, you know, units of churches. So.
Yeah, really grounded in the neighborhoods, in the communities. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
So something, you know, you do talk a little bit about in you know, the publications around this book and trying to spread the word about it. You speak to some of the modern anti-union campaigns and how this story is relevant today. So, you know, what are some of the lessons that you hope readers or organizers or just working people generally can draw from this strike and this story, you know, especially in our current crisis that we're facing as a labor movement?
You know, I think what the strike shows is, and I think I might have said it before, we never know who our allies are if we don't stand up and fight for justice. We may assume that we're going to be isolated. We may assume that we're weak. And then we stand up as the roads workers in Garrett County did, and we find allies that we wouldn't have expected, because there's other people who've been watching what's going on and are dissatisfied. Even some of our coworkers. I mean, I think anybody that's ever had anything to do with labor knows that a lot of times some of the folks that appear to be most outspoken drop to the back, and some of the folks that are quieter and appear to be maybe not prone to stand up and fight end up taking the lead. We don't know until we challenge, wealth and power if it needs to be challenged. And I think this is just an excellent example. And I think there's probably everyday examples. Problematically, after the strike, there wasn't a spread of unionism in the county. And I think all of us in the labor movement need to take a strong assessment over how we continue gains after a major victory, like in an organizing drive or in a contract battle. But I really think it's going back to the fundamentals of speaking to the interests of working people in the working class, and then pursuing those and looking for every ally we can get along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there about the victories, I think is really important. And, honestly reminds me somewhat of my organizing career, where I have had some victories over times and did not fully capitalize on those, frankly. And that's something that I've looked at in my own past. And I think you're right that we as a labor movement have to be continually building momentum, right? And just it's easy to take your foot off the gas when you win a big election or a big union campaign or a strike, but really it should be building into the next phase, right? The next phase of struggle, building out an additional layer of activists and supporters, et cetera, right? Always just growing and trying to be stronger. So the last thing I'll ask you, Len, is, what's the reception been like to the book? Especially curious about folks local there in Garrett County.
Oh, it's been it's exceeded my expectations. I expected it would be well received, because I interviewed 250 or so people, and that's significant in a county of 30,000. I expected that it would be well received, but it's been really well received. And that crosses a lot of boundaries of, from the strikers and their families to current and past county leaders of all politics to transplants like myself. I mean, I moved here as a second homeowner. After being a second homeowner for quite a while. This is Maryland's biggest lake, and actually there's no natural lakes in Maryland, but Maryland's biggest lake is here. So a lot of folks came to vacation, and some baby boomers like myself ended up staying. So it's been well received over a broad spectrum, and including some of the young, hopefully up and coming leaders. The second part of my book is online, and I talk about the changes that happened after the strike. And my goal, my hope was, and my goal was that some of these up and coming leaders better understand what preceded them and take the lessons, good and bad, from that struggle, this very important struggle, and apply them to today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Len, was there anything else you wanted to leave us with before we let you go?
No, I really thank you for the time. And I want to give a shout out to Tim Sherd from Hardball Press. I mean, I'm not a professional writer. I wrote for 11 years for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, but I've never written a book before that. And Tim has done great publishing on labor subjects and labor folks, and helped me through the process. So I encourage other folks to, if you have a local labor battle or a local labor hero, Shiro, talk to Tim Sherd at Hardball Press and see if you can get a book. And you won't get rich, you won't become Stephen King, but you're gonna move some people. So
That's awesome. Yeah, big fan of
thank
Hardball
you.
Press. And the book is The Strike That Changed Maryland's Wilderness County. And it is, of course, printed by Union Shop. Really appreciate you, Len. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks very much. I really enjoyed the conversation. So,
All right.
thanks.
Take care. Yeah,
You
really,
too.
really enjoyed that. Looking forward to checking out the book. I think it's so cool when folks are able to get these stories out there. As a former history teacher, student of labor history, it just amazes me the struggles that we've had, that our working forefathers and foremothers have had before us. And yeah, there's so many lessons we can take away from mistakes that were made to victories that were won. It's just so important to know our history, to know where we come from, to know what people have done before us, right? Because it's easy to think you're in this alone, or you're experiencing something for the first time. But the truth is, workers have come before you and have dealt with similar issues. They've dealt with similar enemies. They've dealt with similar challenges, similar allies. And we have a lot to learn from that. So I really commend Len for getting that story out there, and Hardball Press for working with him on that. It has gotten me thinking about some of the stories here in Alabama that we really need to get out. So I know be having some conversations soon with some more folks about labor history in Alabama. If you're interested in that kind of thing, please do reach out to us. It's obviously something we're passionate about, and we think it's important to reclaim our heritage. Something Len mentioned about the portrayal of AFSCME as like outside agitators really resonated with me, because that is something we experience so much in Alabama. Anytime there's a high-profile union organizing drive, the powers that be portray it as like, Yankee outsiders, outside agitators, people who aren't like us, right, is what they want you to believe. And it's just total BS, right? It is a disservice to the workers themselves who are organizing, and it's disservice to our proud history of working people struggling for a better life here in Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to be able to get a grant and take some time off work, maybe write a book about some of the stuff. Because I mean, like you said, I mean, the public sector stuff is particularly, there's not a whole lot of engagement with that. I mean, the fact that we had in Alabama multiple teacher strikes in the 70s that were really big, and that the teachers won. And there's literally nothing about it. The only thing that you can find about it is like a small reference in the AEA's own history book.
Yeah, though I will say I had a PhD student reach out to me some time back doing some research on just this topic, public sector unions and public sector teacher strikes in the South. So hopefully that will be changing. Hopefully there will be more out there. If you are a history student out there and you're interested in labor, feel free to reach out to us and connect with us. We're happy to talk and collaborate any way we can be helpful. I mean, at one time, 1 in 4 Alabamians were members of a labor union. Walker County was the most unionized county in the country. That's a really cool history, and we've got to reclaim that.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.